Respect.
February 21st, 2022, Grafton School District Board of Education meeting to order. Ask everyone present to please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We've got two items on the consent agenda item this evening. Approval of the minutes from January 24th and the statement of receipts and expenditures for January 2022. A motion to approve those consent agenda items.
So moved.
Second.
A concurring tie. Carrie, you've got that? All right, all those in favor of the motion, aye? Aye. Opposed? And it passes. Let's move on to item, our first action item there, Woodview Elementary School presentation.
Yes, we're excited to welcome Woodview, some staff and students, and Ms. Swenson to come up and start us off with the exciting things happening at Woodview this year. And I especially love her first slide after this slide. That slide.
Kara told me that I was very brave, so that is my senior picture that I dug out just for this event. So I just wanted to say thank you. You know, when I was able to come the first time I met you all, I was so excited, and that excitement has not faded. If you would have told that girl like almost 30 years ago that I would be standing here in my old high school as a principal, I would have said that you're crazy, but now there's no place I'd rather be. So thank you so much, and thank you for having us tonight. I'm so excited to tell you about some of the great things that we have going on at Woodview and share some of our amazing students with you. So we'll just get away from that picture. So we're gonna just tell you a few things that we have going on at Woodview, and then we're gonna highlight an exciting month we've had with our students doing some research on Black History Month that came out of our PBIS team. And then if you have any questions at the end. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, you heard Dr. Gunderson last month talk about the four kind of things we're doing to target some of the data we talked about this summer, our concerns of our third grade ELA scores. So one of the things that I love most about working here is the collaboration across the district. It's such a joy to get to work with Dr. Gunderson and watch both of our buildings target the same goals together, and the staff really work together. The TACA form that he referenced before is a form we use in our PLC process to help teachers analyze data and make sure that we're meeting students' needs. And in this last month, Kennedy and Woodview had the opportunity to virtually attend each other's meetings. And the feedback was really positive. When I met with some of our PLC leaders, they said it was really cool to get to see how the third grade team at Kennedy was doing the same process. It always looks just slightly different. So that was a really positive, collaborative piece that we were able to do, and the teachers really enjoyed. I wanted to focus tonight on the Lexia Core 5 resource that we have just piloted starting January 10th. So this is a new resource that you have heard about that we're utilizing in both of the schools. And when we began the pilot, each student at both elementary school took a placement, kind of like a test. It assessed where they were at in their literacy development. And then the program meets them at, it identifies skills that they might be having as a deficit, and then it gives them targeted practice with those skills to meet their needs. So it's a completely individualized program. The staff and students both have loved it. It's fun to see the students actually really like, a new resource, and the staff love the individualized data on each student that they're getting, and we've gotten so much positive feedback. So I wanted to give you just an example. I can go on at any time and see every single class, how much they're using it, how many minutes they've spent on it, and their growth. And in 1 month, our entire school has grown 5% of our students have achieved at or above grade level status in the span of 1 month, which is huge growth. So I gave you an example on the right there. That's our third grade class as a whole. And so you can see the gray area on the left is the students that at their first placement test were testing below grade level. Blue was at, and on the right you can see that slight bright blue line is above grade level. So left to right, that is the growth that was made in 1 month of usage of the program. So it's very exciting, and it's also, like I said, exciting that the students really enjoy using it. So then I wanted to show you, this is an example, the name is cut off the top, but this is an example of an actual certificate that when a student achieves and completes a level, they get a certificate that can be sent home, and then it shows the skill that they achieved, and on the bottom it gives parents some suggestions of things they could do at home to continue with that repetition and practice. So just kind of a fun thing. Kids like to achieve the certificates, and we've already given out 165 of them. So, it's good stuff in 1 month. So that's just a little bit about Lexia. Then I wanted to move on to some of the fun and exciting things we have going on. This is one thing that is coming up that we are really excited about at Woodview. We have a professional artist coming in. Laura Stone got a grant through the Grafton Education Foundation, and we have a professional artist coming in to work with all of our students. We'll have a chance to be a part of a mural that will be on that very big white wall in our cafeteria. It does not have a lot of joy and brightness. So it now will, the artist took suggestions from the 5th grade class and made it into a mural, and then Mrs. Stone brought it to me to just get a final approval. The intent was bright and joyful, so that wall that you saw will now look like that when students are in the cafeteria, and a little bit more like a bright elementary school. So we're excited. So that will happen in March, and every single student will have the opportunity to be a part of that, which is kind of cool. Then if you ask most students at Woodview what their favorite day of school was this year, it was when Ms. Schwensen had to hold a boa constrictor, which was minorly terrifying. It was very fun. It was a fun outdoor assembly that we had after I had told the students if we were able to reach $10,000 of giving during the virtual giving week that I would hold the boa constrictor. They got to vote on which animal. It was a skunk or that. And then I also got the joy of holding an armadillo that I thought I was going to drop because it like jumped open. And so that's why I'm laughing. But anyways, it was lots of fun. And the students like to, keep talking about that. So that's fun. The winter concert was a large success, and I just wanted to highlight, that was a lot of hard work, and it was just really wonderful to see everybody together again, and the students loved it, and parents were able to see their students perform in person, so that was just a really great experience that we had, and we're looking forward to the spring concert when the other half of the students get to shine. Just recently, we did an opening ceremonies Woodview style. So each class was given a country that's represented in the Olympics, and then we played the opening ceremony music on the loudspeaker, and everybody walked around, and the 4K class went last. They were America, so the students made like a tunnel, and they got to walk through as all the students chanted USA, and it was very fun. And then Mrs. Ebel, who's here tonight, made these beautiful posters for us. And the students have been able to track how many medals each day that their country has won. So it's just been kind of a fun way to have students engage in what is a pretty cool opportunity. So then, again, as you heard Dr. Gunderson and his crew talk about last month, PBIS, we also do PBIS at Woodview, and that's kind of what we're gonna highlight tonight with our Black History Month. Each month we pick a theme, so I just gave you a couple examples. January was goal setting with the new year, and students all set goals for themselves, and in March, it's St. Patrick's Day and Art in Our Schools month, so we're doing Lucky to have arts in our schools and going to do some things with that. But tonight, I'm actually going to hand it over to our newest staff member at Woodview, who has been an amazing addition, and we are so glad to have her, Marie Arthur, and I will let her take over.
Thanks. Well, hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I love working in Grafton. Everyone's been so welcoming and supportive, whether it's parents or administration, other school staff. It's just been awesome. I feel right at home. I'm also very fortunate to be on the PBIS team because I feel like, we all do important work, but I feel like we get to plan a lot of the fun stuff. And who doesn't like to have fun? So for February, we've been doing Black History Month. Each grade level was allowed to choose a topic or theme within Black History Month and provide opportunities for the students to research within their chosen topic. And then students were able to display their work on their lockers, and we have a lot of different ways that the different grade levels did that. The K-4 students were studying African American heroes, and so they learned about some different heroes that they have. The K-5 students were studying inspirational Black women. In first grade, they do a Martin Luther King Jr. unit already, and so it fit perfectly to go with I Have a Dream, and so the students all shared different dreams that they have for themselves or their community. And in second grade, they did the ABCs of Black history, so each student was assigned or I'm sure they got to choose a letter, and then they researched the person that it represented. Third grade did Black History Month, and we did a Guess Who activity where students did some research. They read some books on Epic about a bunch of different influential Black women, and then they got to choose one that they were really inspired by. A lot of the girls loved Simone Biles, right? The gymnastics girl. So that was really fun. And they did a Guess Who, and so it made it kind of interactive. The fourth grade did Unsung Heroes. We've got on the right side, the student is posing like he's going to run for Jesse Owens. Fifth grade did the Paramount Records Blues Trail musicians, the musicians that came here to Grafton, so that was a really nice connection. And they also did a Guess Who, which is really fun. And then this week, students are going around with their class to complete a gallery walk and scavenger hunt bingo. So I put all of the names or topics in the Black History Month bingo board, and they can go around with a partner and see if they can get a bingo. And then I thought, oh, what do K4 kids do? I don't know what K4 students do really. So I thought, well, letters. I bet they work on letters, so they can go on a letter hunt. I recommended the second grade hallway, of course, for that one. And now we've got some students who are going to share. Here's your quick back.
Okay. All right, so we brought 4 students to speak tonight. So I'm going to hand it over to them because they are our most important people here. So we'll start with Will. They're going to share who they researched and what they learned.
I researched about Carter G. Woodson, and what I learned is that he's the father of Black history, and he started Negro History Week, and that's now Black History Month.
Elena's going to come up next.
I researched Ruby Bridges, and what I learned that she was very inspiring to many Black kids to go to be like the first to go to an all-white school. That was very cool and very nice, and she was very brave to go without being scared with the angry crowds that were standing by the door.
Then we have Vivian.
I studied Mary Browser. She was a very famous Union spy, and I learned from her story that certain small types of education shaped some of the greatest heroes today. Harriet Tubman barely could read, couldn't even write. She learned a small amount, and she helped so many people. And the same goes for a bunch of other people. Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay, and then we have our 5th grader, Marquis. And Marquis actually volunteered to come here tonight. He was one of the only 5th graders who volunteered, and he told me that he really wanted to do this and be brave, so I'm really proud of him. All right.
Hi, my name is Marky, and I am very happy to be here today. The whole fifth grade classes researched about what they did for Black History Month. So what Miss Luthi did is she had everybody in her class do what she said for us to pick, and everybody decided to do what they wanted to do. So my group, we did Charlie Patton, and we searched so much that he was a Delta Blue. He was the founder of Delta Blue, and he was also a great singer that I don't even know. I don't even know.
All right, thank you to all of our students that came out tonight and their parents for bringing them. Thank you. So that, I forgot the clicker, but the next slide is questions. Thanks, Tara.
I just got one comment. I think that was great that all four of them came up, no notes, no nothing, and spoke. I give them, that was fantastic.
Good job.
So, well, I have one question for, is Marky back there? Do you like the blues music? The Delta blues music?
I really didn't know about them, but when I researched them, I realized that they were like good singers and very fashion. It was just. And how are they related to Grafton? They were signed by who?
Oh,
Good for you. That's outstanding to pick up something new in all of that research. That is outstanding. I've got a question relative to, for any of the students, relative to Lexia. Your thoughts on that? How many have used it already, and what do you think? Do you like it? Do you like working with it? And
I'll say Lexia is just like grade, seventh grade, second grade, any kind of grade. It's just like a thing for you to get better at what you're not like. If you don't know what you're doing, Lexia is there to help you with it. So pretty much that's what Lexia is for.
thank you. You want to offer?
I really enjoy Lexia, and it really helps that it will give you a pre-test and it just won't set you at like level 1 and you have to keep going to get the level that's actually at a good rate for you. It's not too hard, but yet not too easy. It's just for any person who's doing it. It's very enjoyable.
Thank you. Thank you. The other questions? So certainly I'd echo Mr. Nauda's comments regarding the lack of notes. Outstanding. And a couple of themes that I heard in listening: bravery. You're all very brave for getting up in front of that microphone. It's not an easy thing to do. And you did it all so well. Truly remarkable. Great representation of the work that's going on at Woodview Elementary School, and great representation of each of you in your classes, and the learning and the growing that you're doing in the school year. And we just want to thank you all very much for being here and for being brave to step forward tonight. It's truly remarkable. Thank you.
so one thing we didn't do last month that we used to do is we'd have the kids come up and take a picture with the school board, and I didn't think of it last month until now. So I apologize to Kennedy. I'll use the excuse of COVID. Like, there's so many these traditions that we've done. I forgot until now, like, because we didn't do this last year. We weren't able to do this, so it's been a year. So it'd be great if we could have the students come up and take a picture with the school board, and Ms. Arthur, you'd come up as well. That'd be great. Like, get you and Ms. Swenson with the school board, so we get a picture of you and post on social media. That'd be awesome.
So come on up. Kids, watch out for the cohorts. Watch out for the cohorts.
Two, three. Nice job. Great. Parents, one more. Good job. Nice job. Thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. So you don't need to stay for the rest of the meeting. You're free to go. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Ready?
Yes, sir.
Sure, yeah.
Of course.
Of course.
Can you make it?
There we go. Mom's got it.
Say hi. Thank you.
Well done.
See you guys.
Thank you.
See you, Margie.
All right, tough act to follow, Mr.
I
Nelson,
will,
but
I'll continue to focus on
Superintendent's report.
students. Congratulations. What's that? Use your notes. Yes, I will. Yeah, that's not funny. Not funny at all. Okay, congratulations to our John Long Middle School students, Jenna Blower, Shanuk Shaduri, Tanvi Hardis, Jacob Nestler, Tanner Pock, Will Riley, Mason Rigg, and Aiden Worden, members of the Random Engineers First LEGO League team on their second place finish in robot performance and top 4 finish in robot design of the Wisconsin State Championship Tournament. The team is coached by Dave Nestler, Larry Pack, Alex Riley, and Joe Riley. So it's pretty cool to see something that just started just a couple of years ago and the work that they've done. You can see the kids and just see them, how proud they are of the work they're doing. And congratulations to them and their coaches. It's National Public Schools Week, February 21st through 25th. So across the nation, we celebrate our public schools, and as the one institution that educates children's students regardless of their ability, race, wealth, religion, or country of origin. It's a week set aside to pledge to strengthen the future of our country by supporting public schools. So thanks to all of our staff that make a difference every day for our students. We are proud to take part in this week and recognize our staff and our students and the work that they do. It's Career and Technical Education Month is February, and so I have a proclamation from Dr. Underly that says, whereas the Association for Career and Technical Education has designated February 2022 as Career and Technical Education Month, and whereas Career and Technical Education increases graduation rates, and improves academic performance through meaningful experiences, thus engaging students, improving the quality of their education, preparing them for careers in post-secondary education, and giving all students leadership opportunities in their fields and in their communities. And whereas career and technical education programs provide students with school-to-career connections, foster productivity, innovation, and entrepreneurship, and are the backbone of a strong, well-educated workforce in business and industry, which contributes to America's leadership in the global marketplace. And whereas profound economic and technological changes in our society are rapidly reflected in the structure and nature of work, thereby placing new and additional responsibilities on our educational system. And whereas the ever-increasing cooperative efforts of career and technical educators with business and industry stimulate the growth and vitality of our local and national economy by preparing graduates for career fields experiencing significant growth, therefore be it resolved that I, Jill K. Underly, PhD, State Superintendent of Public Education, do hereby proclaim in the state of Wisconsin Career and Technical Education Month, February of 2022. And we also want to recognize the 2006-2007 Grafton High School girls basketball team and coaches that were recognized at the February 4th GHS girls basketball game. The team had won the WIA Division II state championship in 2007. They were the first North Shore Conference school to win a state basketball title. So our very own Lindsay Charles, who teaches special education at the high school, she had organized that, was also a starter on that team. But it was great to see all of those coaches and the players come back, managers come back. Mr. Nada also helped organize some of that, but shout out to that team, and it was great to see them at halftime and see some of our younger players being able to see them also, which was cool. And then I have an update on our stadium logo, field logo. We talked about this previously in finance about looking at our upcoming phase 2 implementation of the field turf, and we have we needed to make a decision for what the logo would look like, and so in conjunction with working with the high school administration, we looked at 3 different things. If you do a Google Maps search right now, it'll show the old G. It's an old photo of the high school from years before the referendum, and the G was on there. You'll see the logo sometimes with the feather that is attached to the helmet, and you'll also see the Hawks shield that you see here. This has become the crest that we use in all of our other sporting events. It's on our basketball courts, it's on our various things. You'll still see some teams with the G, you'll see some teams with the crest, you'll see some teams with the feather. But as we looked at, this is something that will be football, soccer, track is obviously going to be using it, band will be using it. There's opportunities for just a number of extracurriculars to be utilizing it as well. And so it's something that we're bringing to the board, so you'll see what the final design looks like to make sure that you're comfortable with that. And that's what that will look like with the coloring. There's still some things that we're looking at with them of the black and the white with the pieces. Remember when we first looked at it, we had Grafton Hawks, and we switched that to say Grafton Blackhawks, so you can see it there, the Kellner Field for the donation that went with that, that we're bringing that to the board for some feedback if there's any that you'd like to have us more to look into as we move ahead. The area that's in that circle, so you'll see that we've set it up. You can have soccer on there, so you can see the soccer line. So soccer can be played on here as well as football. And there is an opportunity for us to have lacrosse also painted on there. So there's going to be marks where they can do the paint that disappears afterwards. But that circle area, if the logo that you choose, if you choose to change the logo, it's a $50,000 cost. So it's a big chunk of change to look at making a change to a logo. And so that's why we ended up moving forward with that logo on the main field.
Looks good.
I like that.
Okay, so wanted to bring that to the board, make you aware of that, and that goes with it. I also have the Grafton Educational Foundation announcement, which has their night of giving confirmed for the evening of 5/13, so May 13th. It's now been confirmed for the Ozaki Nonprofit Center. So right down the street off the south side of Cheyenne. There will be wine and beer tasting. U.S. Bank is the title sponsor again. They are looking for donations, so if anyone has any ideas of new fun live auction items especially, they are doing a fund and need. They're discussing that at their March meeting. A few ideas have been brought to the table, and they are going to be discussing that in March. Seize the Harvest campaign garnered approximately $10,000 before expenses. The grant deadline for grant proposals for staff is April 8th. They have a new chairperson for the Color Blast, and the main sponsor, Port Washington State Bank, has decided to not sponsor this year. So they are looking for a new presenting sponsor for the event. So if you know of anyone that is interested in being a presenting sponsor, please let us know. It's a $5,000 commitment, includes naming rights on the logo, packet pickup at business location, race day volunteer opportunities, and more. So the race averages over 500 participants each year with a wide community reach. It's an amazing opportunity for a local business to get exposure and have a blast doing it. And they are looking at purchasing new grant mascot costumes. Are being purchased one adult and one child size for them. So Educational Foundation is hard at work. Appreciate all the work they do supporting our staff, and are excited to see some of those grant proposals going into them. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Superintendent Nelson? None. Thank you. Let's move on to the public comment section. We folks here interested or ready to make public comments? I see one. All right. I did receive approximately 14 emails from 11 community members. They have all been shared with the board. So with that, Dan, the floor is yours.
Dan Nash, 1620 North Pine Street, Grafton, Wisconsin. I'd like to start off with a question for you, Superintendent Nelson, since this is very odd that I have to do this. Earlier at a school board meeting, it was said that we could not approach the board or talk to the board or whatever. Can I at least look at them?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Okay. All right, that's enough for my stand-up tonight. All right, 226 for the Grafton Music and Theater Boosters. I am here as the advocate of them, and I would like to just let you all know what we got going on. 226, this coming weekend, we have the Middle School Solo Ensemble in Kewauskom, Wisconsin. It's going to be a very exciting week for a whole bunch of kids that worked super, super hard to go ahead and do that. Next Wednesday, all my days are coming together, so I'm just going to say dates. 3/2, Grafton Music Theater Board is meeting at the band room, so everyone's welcome to join us. We're going to be getting ready for our next event. On 3/5, Saturday, is Music in the Schools, Chili Day, from 11 to 2. Just come and see the kids. That's all I really ask of anyone here. Just come and support the kids. We'll figure out how to do the rest of the stuff. We're starting our big fundraiser for this year. We're looking at things that we want to do. We finally got gifts from the teachers that they're looking for a piano for the middle school, baritone, bass trombone, not quite sure because I used to play trombone, but I played a regular one. So I believe a bass trombone and a tuba. So we're really trying to get people excited about that so we can help those programs out. I failed today and I apologize to my sponsors for that. Next time I'll bring your names and I'll make sure I read it at the next school board meeting. 3/12, High School Solo Ensemble in Port. And this one takes one towards my heart, and this is the one I think all of us can do in the community to go ahead and support the music program, but more important, support one of our partners, Even Odds Pizza. Everybody pretty much can go ahead and enjoy that. I know I do, a little too much at times, but on Tuesday, 3/15, we're gonna be doing a fundraiser with Even Odds Pizza. Why that's important to me is, yes, we're partnering with him, but as everybody knows, because we all live in a Facebook world, he's went through some times at this time, and we really want to kind of help him out, okay? So that ends my announcements and my stand-up comedy routine, and now I just have a couple of rhetorical questions that I do not want answers or anything for at all. I'd like to understand something that I've been thinking about for probably the last 3 or 4 years, but really once I got in this position on, why is our fine arts program reducing in size? Why is the interest not there from the students? I can go ahead and I can sit here and I can say that it's maybe society as a whole, but as I look out through the world that we live in, we can go ahead and see our communities around us flourishing. We have many, many different things going on around us. And the questions that I ask, because I have a day job and all these other things like that, is why is the interest not there? Is it there's not opportunity? We have opportunity, we can hear, but we know kind of what I'm talking about, how this program is dwindling. We know we have a supply and demand problem. The other question that I have is that we do have interest for the younger ones coming up, like Woodview here. Look at Woodview is going ahead and building that beautiful outdoor classroom that they're going to use for many, many things. The elementary schools have started their drama club and all these other things like that, so the opportunity is there. But when they get into the middle school and they get into the high school, there are choices that need to be made. Granted, we all have to make choices every day, but are we pigeonholing these choices for these kids to make? My youngest son's going to graduate, I think, with, if it's even possible, 8 English credits. Fantastic for him. Math's not his thing, but who are we to say that these opportunities for art are not there for the kids? And then, or is it even a bigger societal problem of a lack of value towards the arts? I don't know. I don't have those answers, but I do have an answer for you. Back in 1989, I graduated from high school, and I was told I was going to go into the trades. At that time, that was not looked upon very highly. It was kind of a backup thing for me. I went and saw an old friend whose mom worked downtown. I was working down there, and she saw me and she said, "Ooh, Nash, what are you doing with your life? What are you doing up here?" And I said, "I'm a carpenter." And her head went down. She said, "You could have been so much more." Nice lady. Should see what her 2 kids are doing now. Winners. So the point I'm trying to make is, what are we all talking about now? Let's bring the trades back into the school, right? Let's bring the trades back into the school. For 20 years, I tried to get into high schools to talk to students about being in the trades. I was turned away. Now we need them. Do we want that same thing to happen with our arts programs? Do we want to go ahead and say that these things aren't here? That empathy is not something that is necessary? That problem solving? That not hearing your opinion from someone else is important? Or better yet, to learn how to be subjectively ruled by a person instead of just objectively? I believe the biggest part the arts give us is that empathy and that understanding of rejection in this world. Because when kids do their best, I've seen them get rated low. You go somewhere else, you just got to do numbers. So all I'm trying to do is make a point here, is not to ask anything from the board, but I would just like to know, as a parent, a community member, and a person in society, why are these numbers dwindling? That's all. So, like I said, no stand-up tonight, and I apologize for going over 3 minutes, and I truly appreciate all of you letting me do that, but I had to get that out. All right? So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan.
Every student, every day.
Anyone else for public comment this evening? All right, hearing none, then let's move on to committee reports. The Finance Committee and Curriculum Committees both met on February 14th. Mark, a recap from the Finance Committee.
Yes, we met last Monday, the 14th. A couple items are coming to the full board as recommendations from that committee, one of which is the 2020-2021 Audit Report. We went through that. A representative from Riley, Penner, and Benton joined us and gave us a summary of things, and we had an opportunity to ask questions and get some clarity on items, and that has been reviewed and is coming to the full board for approval. We also got an update, as Mr. Nash alluded to, the Woodview Outdoor Classroom Amphitheater, and saw some renderings of that, got an update on their financing, where things are at and how that's progressing. All of that will be funded by them before it's started. So it was great to see that, and it would be a great addition to the district. We also got an update from Topher on the 2022-2023 revenue projections, which we will be going into tonight also. And we also reviewed the ESSER-3 budget plan, and Topher will be going through that, what the plan is. We reviewed the survey results, talked through that. And again, that is a recommendation from finance coming to the full board. And lastly, we had a request for field usage out at Zon Fields, and we discussed that item also.
Mark, any questions for Mark? All right, Carrie, update on the curriculum committee.
The curriculum committee met. We went through the curriculum cycle with social studies, world language, and K reading and writing, talking about how they're reviewing to start looking at new textbooks and a new curriculum, as we do it's on a cycle to review and keep us up to date. We also went through professional development, what the teachers have been working on. We learned about Lexia and various other things that the teachers are focusing on, and winter map, which is item J. We got an update on how the students are doing and a preview of how they might do on the forward exam this spring.
Thank you, Carrie. Any questions for Carrie? All right, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Carrie. Let's move on to item E, the 2021-2022 school year plan update.
Yes, I'll invite Laura to come up and walk us through our update for what's transpired over the last month.
I'm actually pretty excited to talk about our son. There we go. Okay. So starting out with our health department, we are still in the high zone for the burden, about 135, the case rate. That is the lowest it's been since July. And actually, if you go on the health department's website right now and you can look by school district, our school district is the lowest in the county. And we're actually not at high, we are at the substantial rate. So we are moving in the right direction. District-wide here, you can tell that we've really flattened out our cases of COVID. And today, we have 0 positive cases in our district, 0 current cases, and we had no new cases at all today. This is just a vaccination update taken from the Department of Health Services website. So not a whole lot of movement from a month ago. About 31% of students between the ages of 5 and 11 are fully vaccinated, 68% at the 12 to 17. So this hasn't changed a whole lot from last month. These are our positive cases by month. I know it's not a full month, but we're about 3/4 of the way through February, and you can tell January we really hit that high, and we've come down substantially. This is just another reviewing it. As of February 17th, rapid tests are now available again at our test site. On January 28th, we opened this up to the community, so it's not just our district families and staff. We requested free masks from Department of Health Services, so those are in all of our buildings available for students or staff to utilize. And this chart just kind of shows the significant decrease that we've gone through since January of the daily cases and the number of active cases, and we've been at 0 probably for the whole weekend, and we were really, really low at the end of last week, so things are moving the way we want them to. So last month we said that we would continue to review our data and make recommendations at this meeting. So there are 4 things that we're recommending. The first one is to discontinue the daily district-wide COVID notifications. We still have all this information on our website, so we're going to continue to track this information internally. And we'd like to discontinue the notification of individual classrooms when there's a positive COVID case. So many times by the time we get the information that a child is sick with COVID, there's a delay in getting that information out to families, and so it's not really even very useful. We would like to discontinue all 6% mitigation factors, required masking, lunchroom procedures, cohorting. Families can still choose to mask their children if they want, and teachers can continue to mask if they would like to. And then last but not least, accept either a lab verified or a home negative test for symptomatic students to return to school sooner than 5 days. Rapid home tests are widely available now, and so we are suggesting that we could use one of those as well as a lab verified test. And now that we have the rapid tests here in the district as well, these are just ways that we can bring students back to school sooner if they're healthy and they don't have COVID. Any questions?
Okay. So similar to previous months, as we have taken up issues relative to the plan, we have recommendations regarding two elements of the plan this evening: consideration of options for mitigation measures and school measures, consideration of options for notification procedures, both of which are embodied in the recommendations that were just made. They will start same process as the previous times. Any clarifying questions that anybody has relative to administration in these recommendations?
I just got one question, I'm sort of on the recommendation. How much is our testing being used right now that we've opened up to the public? Is it?
It's less and less every week. We have maybe 10, 15 people a day.
Okay, and that's the entire community as well then?
We don't get the results for the community members, but I did check last week to find out like the previous week, and there were only 2 community members that had used it. So testing has really decreased.
We'd wanted to see if, with the rapid tests coming back in, if we would see an increase of that. Because an option for us is to be able to open up to anyone in the area. So it wouldn't just have to be Grafton residents. And we were wondering if we really wanted to focus on, we took the initiative to have this for our school and our community, so to make sure that they had first opportunity for it. But with the rapid test, we haven't seen an uptick of testing. And so that's, we'd said if we didn't see an uptick, we were going to open that up to other communities to be able to come in and be able to utilize the testing as well. This is for the good of all, but, we talked a little about that home negative test that the federal government has given everyone for, and so the fact it was now is now you have to, if you don't have $150 to go to somewhere to get a test, or $125, whatever it is, then that caused people to stay out. When someone could afford it, they could do that. So that's why we looked at the home negative test as well as an option.
So a couple of questions regarding that recommendation. In pictures of negative tests, how will we keep those pictures? Is that a student record? What happens with that?
I don't think we look into the legal piece of that. I don't know if it'd be a student record, but we wouldn't keep it just like we do a phone call, though. We would document that it occurred. Like that's what we've done when people have sent their slips in. I guess what have we done when they've sent in their doctor's notes? We're keeping those. But it's whether it's going into Skyward or not.
I don't think it's in Skyward.
Right, we're taking the notation of it.
Okay. And then second, the notification, is this would include the email that everybody gets at around 5 o'clock. You would discontinue those emails.
But you did not get one today.
Did not get one today. That's correct. The rationale and the thought there, aside of the lag, because I'm assuming that the lag is what's driving the primary reason for let's discontinue this, but is there other things that you discussed in terms of its value?
We're still tracking all the positive cases internally, and so that will continue to be posted on the website at noon every day. That'll still get updated, so if people really want to know how many active cases we have, they'll still be able to see that.
But they won't
The
be
more
able to...
emails that we send, the more propensity there is just to hit delete to our emails.
Okay.
Right, I mean, we've shortened, remember we used to do the Tuesday folder and the Thursday folder, and we did all these different things, and so then people eventually just stopped reading it because you hit delete because you're just getting too many of them and just clogging your inbox, and we aren't, we don't want to send an email today saying we didn't have any cases, but we don't want people to think that we forgot either, but we don't know what the value is of that. The other day we had 3 go out, but they came in afternoon, so even on our dashboard it said 2. Well, the next day it said 3 because those 2 had come off, and the 3 that had been emailed out go on the dashboard. So we'd still have that internal dashboard. We have data internally, and we'll be placing it on our dashboard for people to be able to see it.
And the dashboard includes just a running total daily of the number of positive cases, not a reference to new cases per day. I mean, because all of the burden rates and the transmission rates that DHS and Washington Ozaukee County talks about it's the calculation of the number of new cases in the last 7 days, not the number of cases that you're actively managing, because it's that transmission rate that's important to determine whether or not where spread is at. So we lose that piece. But we still maintain statistics relative to our ongoing case rate.
Yes, we maintain it by classroom, by grade level, and by building.
Okay.
And if you look at the health department's website, it's not up to date. Like, everyone's having a hard time
Right.
keeping things up to date. And, we discontinued contact tracing, and that may be something that goes away in other areas as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
As long as we're on the communication, in regards to the classroom emails, if those don't go out and people see it on the dashboard, I'm guessing there might be some people interested in knowing if there is a case, was it in my son or daughter's classroom or not? And they wouldn't be able to get that information by calling, correct?
Correct.
Because with HIPAA, and you can't really.
Yeah, and we're not sure that's the best use of our staff's time. I mean, the problem with it is now is, even as a parent, I got one right after the board meeting. It was right before last month's board meeting, where I got one saying my daughter had been exposed. Someone in her class had become positive to COVID, but it was like last Tuesday, so 5 days had already elapsed. So even if my daughter had been exposed, like, it's the amount of time it's taking for these cases to get results and then to let us know makes those letters that, well, okay, well, I'm getting this, what does this do for me? It did nothing for me as a parent, because that time had already elapsed.
And I was just curious about that, because a couple weeks ago, even at our last board meeting, there was a time that rapid test, we were out of them at the district, and I can tell you that even ours had not come from the government, and trying to find one locally, I had to go to 3 different stores to get a home test, because I needed a rapid, I'd prefer a rapid test at the time to know whether or not my whole family needed to be tested. And if I couldn't have found one, yeah, it would have been days before I could have, my child might have COVID, I should wait and notify, But now that they're back, I'm wondering if families, because it would have been he would have been out, I don't know, he might have COVID, he might not. I would have kept him out several days, waiting, and then had to tell you, like, oh yeah, back, I tested him on Monday, and now it's Thursday, and I'm letting you know he's positive. But now that the rapid tests are back, I would think, I would have told you, hey, I tested him, and by the way, he's positive. And I would have told you on Monday, hey, my child is positive. So I'm thinking it might be the delay we've seen now that we're offering rapid tests, and people likely have gotten them from the government, and they are readily available now at most stores I go to, that we wouldn't see as much of a delay. I think people will use the rapid tests, both to test for negative and for positive.
Yeah, we would hope so, and that's what's great to have it available for free in our district too, so someone doesn't have to go purchase it.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
But even with that notification, remember a month ago, we were saying that like only 1% of families chose to keep their child home when they learned that they were in close contact. So, even to send out the letters, it's not very impactful.
I actually really did, I will not quarantine my child nor keep him home, but it did give me a moment to, had he caught a cold, had he started to show symptoms of what I thought was a cold, I may have been more likely to test, or if we had happened to be that we're happening to go visit, my parents, which we almost never do, would I be more likely to test right before, on the off chance, hey, he might have been exposed at school, I understand there's a low risk, I at least would have the choice then.
Well, you always have the choice.
I always have the choice, but knowing it
But
did.
you're saying there's an impact on staff in continuing that. Was I
Right,
correct
and
in
the
hearing
other
that?
data
'Cause I
point
think
that
that's important too.
An impact on staff, and if they have to if a letter goes out that there was a positive in their classroom, or how's that an impact on staff?
Staff resources.
Yeah, there's
and-
still staff are needing to go into Skyward and select all these different classes that go with the student and send it out. Like that, there's still a piece that goes with that. And the other data point that we shared last month is that 1% of people are quarantining, which, okay, that's fine, that's their option, but less than 1% were becoming positive as well. So it isn't even that, and that was when we had rapid, so it wasn't that people weren't choosing to do it, it's just they weren't becoming positive. So the amount of effort that we're using, we're saying, is that the best use of our resources at this point? Vaccinations are readily available to people. We continue to have a testing site for people. We continue to use the mantra, if you don't feel well, stay home. If people are going to visit loved ones and they have concerns, we think they should come in and get now it would be a rapid, but they can come in and get a free test that goes with it. And we think that's more the emphasis we should be pushing, we believe, is that as we move into an endemic, you're hearing a lot of discussions about that, of like, what are the things we should do? Becoming vaccinated, boosted, using the rapid tests as you can and testing and being smart with, if you don't feel well, staying home, are things that we believe we should be focusing our attention on as a staff.
I get that. I mean, I would just
Yep.
assume, like you just showed the data, that we're down to 0 cases. As fewer and fewer cases arise, you're notifying fewer and fewer people that they've, like we have fewer and fewer positive to even notify of that it was in your classroom. And I fear we do the same. I used to get letters when there was lice in the classroom, hand, foot, and mouth in the classroom, whooping cough in the classroom. Like, I used to get letters all the time. I mean, that was more of an elementary school thing, but I frequently, this was positive in your child's classroom, Was I going to do anything about it? Well, I may or may not check my, at least I know that they may or may not have been exposed to whooping cough, So I just figured this would just go right along with all the rest of, as I said, our cases are going down and down, so it's less of a staff burden, because if there's no cases, obviously you didn't have,
You don't have to contact them.
right.
Yep,
That'd be
we're still letting people every day look at that data point to say, do we have this set up so it's going out to the correct people? Is it accurate? Is it the dates accurate of when this happened? You're still having to put all that data in there, and that's why our recommendation is to not do it.
Okay.
The unpublished guideline that we followed relative to 20%, is that what it is? That will remain?
It will, yep, just as it did 2 years ago when we
Right.
stayed open.
As we
Without
see-
we didn't have a 4, 6, 15% guideline at that point. We had our internal and we stayed open.
Right. Okay.
That's why
And-
we'll
and
keep it internally. Mhm.
That would apply, and we'd be able to gather that information from our internal data.
Correct.
The results of that occurring would be available on the dashboard in
Daily,
daily.
yep,
in
not
one
weekly, but
form.
daily, yep.
So there's tracking information, okay.
And just so you know, like daily, I have 2 people looking at 1201 to make sure that the dashboard is updating. Like it's like checks and balances, because all these things are programming that just one little code piece. Rick's laughing because he's one of them. But because I know people are looking to make sure our data is accurate, and sometimes it doesn't tabulate. And sometimes I had board members text me like, "Hey, so and it says 0. That's no way that's possible." And you're like, "Yep, you're right. Let's look at that." And yep, they were working on it right now. And so we still are dedicating resources to looking at this on a daily basis to make sure the data is accurate, because we want people to trust our data, and it's honest data. It's what we have, but we will continue to have that on our website daily.
How many of our classrooms have hit the 6% since the last board meeting?
One. I
One?
think Kennedy 3 weeks ago, perhaps. And then Woodview not since like middle of January.
So I guess I'm kind of curious on the recommendation to discontinue. Why do we need that recommendation? Like, if we don't hit 6%, obviously it automatically discontinues, because we're not, we're never hitting that point. So do we need to discontinue it if it's, or we could leave it in place? Because, if we would ever get back to 6%, then it would trigger, but likely we could wait a month and 2 months, it probably won't be triggered again, hopefully. I'm just curious on why the decision to recommend now to discontinue 6%.
Because we believe that the data point is not as accurate as we move forward. There's all of our discussion about face coverings and masks and having them be required for students, staff enforcing that, all those pieces, we don't believe is the best use of our staff's time, when it could be in a classroom, it could be 3 students, and it could be for a day that you get to that 6%, and then they're in that for 5 calendar days. And we shortened it earlier, but we didn't see that as being the best use of staff time as we head into the March and the spring season for the year.
Additional questions, if any? So as I look at the school plan that's out there, essentially you're proposing we would take out all of the shift in school operation elements, right? We would keep all of the virtual learning elements would stay just as they are now. All the mitigation elements that are included in the plan would stay just as they are now. There'd be modifications to the communication section. does this impact at all household contacts of positive COVID cases? None of this would change that,
That would all stay the same.
We've not recommended that.
okay? Quarantine for 5 days would still remain for positive cases? Okay. Last chance, well, another chance for questions, clarifying questions.
So what's left, the 5-day quarantine for a positive case, what else is remaining as far as mitigation? So I don't have the plan for me.
As far as mitigation?
Yeah, anything that's left. I mean, it's hard to keep up with.
Yeah. Well, if you could, why don't you bring up the current school year plan if you can, please? You just, that's what I was scrolling through.
Well, there's still,
Yeah.
you know, our air
The ventilation.
system remains, that's not.
Yeah,
going
I guess,
anywhere. Cleaning
that's not
remains,
something we turn off, I suppose.
right?
No, it's still having hand sanitizer.
So there's still stuff in,
Isolating positive cases is still involved, promoting vaccination, as I said earlier, people having the option to do that. Still having the under communication, the dashboard is still updated.
I'm sorry, the what communication?
The dashboard is still updated under communication, so you get rid of the first bullet and the third bullet. Under communication, keep the second bullet. Quarantining would still be, you wanna make that bigger, Kara, control B, or just do the plus, thank you. So quarantining would still be the same. And we'd say the enhanced symptom monitoring, we would be adding under that first bullet, while it says, or while awaiting lab verified COVID test results, we would be adding the home test to that as an option that we haven't used before. We'd still say that students and staff should be symptom free. And if they have viral symptoms, we'd be asking to wear a face covering and isolate till they get picked up. Lunchroom, we continue to have those pieces, so there's no change. In athletics, it's still ongoing, and that's varied depending on the sport and how they've done that. But that's been more a conference decision or a WIA decision.
So then if there's a positive case, other district students in the household, they can come back if they test negative? Or what's that? Or is it still the 10 days for them?
Laura, why don't you walk them through that? Because that's
Or until
yeah, we've had that discussion point multiple
The
times.
staff member or family member can isolate. The student is asymptomatic, they can come back immediately. They can't isolate, that's where those 10 days come in. So the sick person's home for 5 days, and then the rest of them have to stay home for an additional 5.
Even with a negative test, they still have to not come to school.
Okay. Any additional questions? Hearing none, then there is a recommendation from administration to discontinue daily district-wide COVID notifications, yet maintaining internally tracked data relative to positive cases on the dashboard, to discontinue notification of individual classrooms of COVID positive cases, to discontinue all 6% mitigation factors, required masking, lunchroom procedures, and cohorting, and to accept either a lab verified or a home negative test for symptomatic students to return to school sooner than 5 days. That is the administrative recommendation. So I would entertain a motion regarding those recommendations, or any other motion that somebody would like to make relative to potential changes to that recommendation, additions or deletions.
I'll make a motion to accept administrative.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll take a voice vote. Sean?
Yes. No. Yes.
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 The motion passes. Are there any additional motions that anyone would want to make relative to the school plan?
Can we discuss just a little bit more?
Yep.
I just, personally, I would prefer wanting to be notified if I was in a class, if I have a child in a classroom. And I do like the negative test, the last bullet point where you can do your own home test and take a picture. I mean, I think that's okay, but as far as the not being notified in the classroom, that's what I would prefer. So, other than that, I think it's okay.
Okay.
That's all.
Other thoughts? Anybody else? If not, we'll move on. I mean, it has been and continues a long and arduous journey. None of this is easy, nor is any of it familiar. Each month, each week, each day that passes by, the country struggles with this element or these elements. We are no different in our struggle. I applaud administration for giving this continued and regular consult and discussion regarding what's in the best interest of students for their learning environment and what's in the best interest of staff in regards to their ability to deliver and maintain and foster a positive learning environment. And I appreciate all of the efforts and all of the discussions that have gone into each and every month what this plan should look like. I think because I have been tracking the data on a daily basis every time one of those things come out, we set out a plan to ensure that we are in-person learning. I think right now, as measured by student days since the start of the year, we're 99% in person. There have been 8 instances of virtual learning and at the classroom level and 1 at the grade level. But still measuring that against student days, it's 99% in person. And I think that's remarkable. A plan that has met its objectives and has kept students safe in the process. Not a perfect plan in regards to what everyone thinks, but a plan that was well thought out, a plan that was well managed, a plan that's well executed, and a plan that still has significant and critical mitigation elements in place to ensure that students remain safe. So I, again, thank you to the administration. Thank you to the students and to parents who are following these plans and doing the right things day in and day out. And as well to the board for the time and effort that you've put into wade through your own personal feelings and the feelings relative to what's in the best interest of our district. So thank you. Okay, let's move on to item F, personnel report.
Yes, we have 4 retirements that we would ask the board for approval. They'd be retiring at the end of the 21-22 school year. Marcia Gora Paddock, art teacher at Grafton High School. Rosalind Isbell, school counselor at Grafton High School. Julia Laurie, school psychologist at Grafton High School. And Jill Wargalette, second grade teacher at Woodview Elementary School. So similar to what we've done in the past, we'll do our retiree videos. And we will invite these 4 retirees to a board meeting at the end. I think it's May that we're looking at that, having some cake to celebrate them and have the opportunity to recognize them. But we do bring their retirements towards the board for approval.
So do I have a motion to accept the resignation, the retirement request as presented?
Retirements.
Just finish the year.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Of course, as always, these are big shoes to fill in many, many strong years of guidance and encouragement for our students, and we thank them
Yep, and we'll make
today,
sure we
and we
recognize.
will again.
Yep, yeah, we'll have an opportunity to recognize them in person as well as do that video. That's been a nice positive piece to recognize our retirees and thank them for their years of service and work they've done with our kids over the years. So they'll be missed, but we'll have an opportunity to celebrate them.
All right, all those in favor of the motion, aye? Aye. Opposed? And the motion passes. Item G, the approval of the 2020-2021 audit report.
Yes, so as we've done the past several years, we've had our auditor come to our finance committee meeting to present our audit, as well as be able to take questions and engage in discussion with the finance committee about our audit. So in that presentation, the audit process was outlined, financial results were provided, and findings from the audit were presented, as well as procedure improvement improvements were also presented and discussed. And then the finance committee did put forward a recommendation to the full board to approve the audit as it states in board policy.
Okay, then I'd entertain a motion consistent with the recommendation of the finance committee that the board adopt the 2020-2021 audit as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? The one item, Topher, that I would ask is that in regards to the items that were included in the management letter comment, that you give some consideration to an update to the board or to the finance committee would be sufficient within, I don't know, whatever time frame you think appropriate to get those recommendations implemented, so we get an update, so that we make sure that in regards to the items raised, that we're closing the loop.
Sure.
All right.
One question too, there was the transportation. Do we, when a parent buys a seat on the bus, do we have to report that to DPI?
That is not aidable. So
Okay.
that's someone who's
That's
not eligible for transportation.
It's just a
Therefore, they're not counted and not calculated in our transportation aid.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, aye? Aye. Opposed, and none, passes. Thank you. All right, 2022-2023 revenue projections.
All right, this was also discussed at length at the Finance Committee meeting last Monday. And so I'll go through that again tonight. This is an information item only, but we're at that part of the year where we need to start looking at our revenue projections before we move on to later steps in the budget development process. So I'll go into some of these in more detail in further slides, but we are assuming that our revenue limit will decrease by about $43,000 due to a freeze in the revenue limit per member allowed, as well as not having any change in our 3-year membership average. We're going to look at increased private school tuition levy. We're assuming there'll be no change in the reimbursement of aidable special ed aid costs, as well as the per pupil aid remaining flat, along with open enrollment revenue that comes into the district also remaining flat. One area of increase in revenue would be the Zahn Field lease, which should be generating about $30,000 next year. Overall, a slight decrease in revenue. Looking at some of those factors, that maximum revenue per member freeze, the last biennial did freeze that amount for both years of the biennium. That, along with our membership projection remaining fairly flat, doesn't provide any new revenue for the district. In fact, we're going to use a no change in our 3-year average of 1,943 in calculating our revenue limit. That provides the least amount of potential revenue for the district. It's essentially a worst-case scenario. Last year, for 2021-22, you can see that initial calculation of $21,076,000. If we have no change in membership and we do not, and by the state biennial budget doesn't provide additional revenue in that membership amount, then we'll have that same initial calculation that we had for this year's revenue limit. The hold harmless and declining enrollment exemptions would drop off, so they don't follow into the next year. Therefore, we would have $43,000 less available to us in the revenue limit. To further illustrate the point, you can see in that first column, that's this current year budget. So we had an initial calculation of $21,076,000. We also had the additional hold harmless and declining enrollment exemption on top of that. Again, for this year, if we don't have a change in membership, those two exemptions fall off and we have reduced revenue available to us for next year. Now, if our membership increases by 10 over what we're projecting, that would make revenue available for each of those 10 students $10,847, meaning our revenue limit would be about $108,000 more than what we're projecting. Now, if our membership drops by 10, then our initial calculation is going to be $108,000 less than it otherwise would be, but that hold harmless brings us up to that initial calculation of $21,076,000, and the decline in enrollment adds another $108,000 on top of that. So that would be just like the having an increase of 10 in our 3-year membership average, a decrease of 10 students does provide an additional $108,000 in revenue. However, a huge portion of that, of course, falls off the next year. Those two exemptions of $108,000 each would fall off the following year. So obviously we'd prefer either a flat revenue or a membership, and obviously would prefer increased membership. One other piece of that revenue limit calculation is the private school tax levy exemption. So for students that participate in the private school choice program, there's a calculation that we are given where we are allowed through an exemption to increase the tax levy so we can raise funds and bring those into the district and then send them out to the state so they can go directly to the schools. So for the budget, it really doesn't affect our budget bottom line because this is a revenue that's available and it washes out with the expense that we incur when we send those funds to the state. It increases every year, primarily because at the kindergarten and first grade, as well as the 9th grade level, students can participate in the program even if they haven't attended a public school. So they can jump in, never having attended the Grafton School District, and participate in the program. So each year, new kids become eligible to jump into that program. And so you've seen a steady increase as each class, if you will, jumps into that program. I talked about special ed state aid. So we have, you can see in blue, our transfer from Fund 10 into Fund 27 to cover the costs not covered by state special ed aid in red, as well as federal grants and Medicaid. So out of that $5 million, we have to transfer roughly $3 million from Fund 10 to cover special ed costs. Now, state special ed aid, we're not expecting any additional state aid. It's a reimbursement from prior year expenditure. Even though there might be a small increase called for in the state budget, those funds typically fall short of providing the stated percentage because of increasing costs in special ed. And so we're not anticipating any additional state aid to cover special ed costs for next year. Also mentioned open enrollment revenue that comes in from other districts. when their kids open enroll in is expected to remain flat, along with our expenditure of open enroll tuition that goes out, meaning we would have a net revenue that would be flat relative to last year. So those are the revenue pieces. Next steps in the budget is putting together the expenditure budget. Biggest piece of that, of course, is personnel, which is based primarily on our student enrollment, particularly at the elementary level, as well as these course selection at the middle and high school level. As you can see, after years of declining enrollment, we had a fairly significant increase in enrollment for the current year and are projecting a relatively flat enrollment trend going forward. So we do have some challenges. Once we put that expenditure budget together and work on finalizing the preliminary budget in May and June, we do have the challenge, right? Expenditure, we're in an inflationary period, costs are going up, cost of educating students are going up, but we do have that freeze in our revenue that the state put forward. We have a relatively flat membership average, which means we're not getting additional revenue for additional students. We have, the way the revenue limit calculation goes, we've seen exemptions decrease by over $400,000 over the past couple of years, while we've seen our projected enrollment increase over that same 2-year period. All of this in the environment of inflationary pressures, creating pressure on staff in terms of having CPI being the highest it's been since 1990 at 4.7%. We're having to compete with fewer people in the field, with other districts, with a shrinking pool of candidates, as well as competing now more than we have in the past with private employers that are increasing wages at an increased rate. If we go back, why are we in a situation where revenue is frozen? When we go back to last summer when the biennial budget was passed, it was stated that state funding, additional state funding for schools that would be spendable, was not needed because the federal government had provided so much funding through ESSER funds, and that is true. There's a significant amount of money available through that. Now, knowing that that federal money would eventually run out and create a fiscal cliff, it had also been mentioned that at the time there was a $1.6 billion surplus in the state budget. That's now grown to $3.8 billion. That money could be used in the next biennial budget to increase our revenue limit to avoid the fiscal cliff that would come once those federal funds run out. It had also been mentioned because certainly there are a number of districts that don't necessarily get a lot of ESSER funding, that if those districts had challenges with their finances, they could always go and ask taxpayers to approve an operating referendum. So what are other districts doing right now? They're already currently using in the current budget ESSER funds to balance their 21-22 budget. Of course, 22-23 budgets will lean even more on ESSER funds, especially with those inflationary pressures. Many districts will end up using up their ESSER funds next year, which will set up a fiscal cliff for those districts in 23-24, meaning next spring, as they know they're using up their ESSER funds and the next state biennial budget will be being developed, there's going to be a lot of pressure. They're going to be requesting that additional funds be put in the state budget to avoid that fiscal cliff with the ESSER funds disappearing. So they'll have a choice though. If the state doesn't backfill that, they'll have a choice of either making severe cuts to programming or to pass an operating referendum to continue funding programming as it is. For us, we have balanced the current budget without using ESSER funds, so we're in a good spot from that standpoint. We are budgeting for an increase in salaries like many districts are, and looking to approve wage increases sooner rather than later to try and increase our staff retention and ability to attract staff for next school year. ESSER funds are going to be needed. We're quite certain that they'll be needed to be balanced, used to balance that next year's budget, the 22-23 budget. We do have $1.6 million available over the next two budgets to be used. However, once we hit 2024-25, those funds no longer become available. That would be the second year of the next biennium, so we would certainly get a heads up well before we got there, because next spring, that's when the next biennium will start to get developed, which would be well ahead of 24-25. So what we'd be looking for, certainly, as ESSER funds dry up earlier for some districts, later for us, would be increases in school funding to make up for those 2 years, the current year we're in, plus next year, of having $0 increases in the revenue limit per member amount. You see that in the pink color of the fact that the trend isn't there. With 0-0 instead of a 200 and then another 200 in the second year, which would help pay for increasing costs in educating students, that's not there. So we'd need, and other districts would need, $600 in that first year of the biennium, and then an additional $200 per member in that second year to get back on track for where funding had been going. Without that, that gap would continue for districts into the next biennium if, for example, they approved 200 and 200 as the increases in the 2 years of the next biennium. So if that is what occurs, then districts would need to spend fund balance to cover the revenue shortfall. An operating referendum would be needed to increase the revenue limit moving forward. Otherwise, without any of those two things, you would need to make staffing reductions, wage freezes, or benefit reductions in order to bring expenditures online with those revenues. So on that happy note, that's our revenue projections for next year. Again, this is information only, but if anyone has any questions, now would be the time.
Any questions for Topher? Just one, Topher. What is the revenue for open enrollment in and out? Revenue or the cost? Per pupil?
Oh, sure. So it is it's a little over $8,000. I think it's $8,125.
8,000
for regular education. For special ed, it's around $11,000 per student. So it just depends on whether the student is special ed or not.
Okay.
So that has gone up quite a bit in past years.
Mm-hmm.
It's not expected to go up very much next year, which was not a good thing for us because we are a net surplus in terms of revenue for that.
Any additional questions? I know we spent a fair amount of time on this at the Finance Committee meeting, so hearing none, I thank you. There's still more work to do. We will gather the expenses, correct? May, a preliminary budget, and then June, a preliminary budget approval, right?
Yes.
All right, then let's move on to ESSER 3 budget plan approval.
All right, so this came out of finance. We discussed this quite a bit in finance. A plan has been brought forward from finance for approval. I'm going to ask some of my friends to come up and help, Ms. Stouts and Mr. McMahon, to go over some of this material as well. So I'll just review the funding that we have available through ESSER 3. Comes from 3 different buckets within ESSER 3. First, of course, the title allocation. The Title I allocation allocated 90% of the funds to school districts across the state. For us, because we don't have a big Title I population, we received about almost $420,000 out of that title allocation. 20% of those funds need to be expended on evidence-based intervention strategies. The rest can be used for any allowable expense under ESSER. We received about $734,000 for learning loss allocation. All of that must be spent on evidence-based intervention strategies. And then the in-person allocation, which was allocated based on the fact that we were in person last school year. We received about $450,000. That can be used for any eligible expense under ESSER. Total allocation, $1,600,000, most of which, slightly more than half, must be used on evidence-based intervention strategies. And I'll point out that this was allocated by the federal government and was meant to provide additional resources to help with the impacts of the pandemic. The state felt different. As a reminder, I mentioned this earlier, the state felt differently about how those funds should be used. And the state decided that they would not need to give any additional funds to schools because we had this federal money that we could use to pay for the increasing costs of educating students. So I want to make that point clear in case anyone viewing at home went to the fridge to get a snack during my revenue projection presentation. So priorities with our ESSER3 budget would certainly be maintaining our current staffing, programming, and services. As I mentioned, there is a gap because of no additional revenue from the state for the next couple of years. So definitely wanting to maintain our current staffing, programming, and services. Now, over the years when we've had declining enrollment, we have been able to decrease teacher FTE because we had less students to educate. As our enrollment has flattened out, our teacher FTE is also flattening and expected to continue to flatten out. In fact, we are now having our meetings looking at teacher FTE and what those personnel needs would be that we are going to look at and talk about at the board level in March and April. And we've already talked about the increased need at the elementary level in first grade because we have some bubble classes there, looking at adding first grade teachers at each of the elementary schools. At the middle and high school level, it's expected to be overall flat, knowing of course that different departments, depending on course selection, could see increased or decreased FTE, but overall it would be relatively flat at the 612 level. So again, maintaining current staffing is a priority with regard to ESSER3, but any remaining funds that aren't used just to maintain staffing would be used for additional services over the 22-23 and the 23-24 school years. With that, Mr. McMahon has some survey data to present.
So as a part of the ESSER3 process, there's a need to engage stakeholders. ESSER1 and ESSER2 did not ask for that. So on January 28th, we sent out a survey to all parents. We sent it to our high school students as well as community members through our district website. We engaged 405 parents, 10 students at Grafton High School did take the survey. We're proud of those 10 students. 19 community members and 112 staff members engaged in our survey that was open until February 9th. As a part of that, they were able to prioritize the 17 areas that we looked at from the perspective of mental health, as well as instructional, evidence-based instructional strategies. And we've categorized them for you here just as a top-down from 1 to 4. They were prioritized on a Likert type scale, 1 being the lowest priority, 4 being the highest, and we have some information on the top 4 that emerged. Top 4 were mental health resources and social emotional learning were 1 and 3 kind of connected to that mental health component that we've heard so much about. Staff continuity, dedicated building subs, staff retention incentives that we've heard about that Topher has talked about. And then 4th would be instructional support. I also added 5th, 6th, and 7th. You can see technology was important, not in the top 4, and interventions were also important, but the curriculum development process was also top 7. You can see 15, 16, and 17 were after-school programming, maximizing social distancing, and protective supplies was the last ranked priority of our stakeholders through this process. As a part of that process, we followed through with what DPI has given to us. This is some of the allowable expenses that they've shared as it relates to evidence-based intervention strategies. One of the first questions you see on this document is what can you build on that you're already doing? So in thinking about what what we're currently doing with our interventionists. We have reading interventionists at both Woodview and Kennedy. We have a math interventionist at Woodview that's tied to Title I. What can we do with those particular positions, or can we add to those positions? Thinking about curriculum resources is also a part of this process. You've heard Jill talk about Lexia earlier today. Is that a resource that could be an addition to what we're currently doing for next year and could be used for ESSER 3 funds? Social emotional learning, connected to mental health, the first and third priority on that survey that Laura will talk about in a moment. And then summer learning, can we supplant some of those funds for summer teaching, adding on to what we've already done with robust interventions in summer school? Can we add things like math intervention or AVMR, things that we've done during the school year? Can we add that as a summer school activity? Those are all examples of that evidence-based intervention strategy.
Okay, so the survey results show that mental health and social emotional resources are a high priority for our families, our staff, our community, everybody. So all the bulleted points on here are either services or resources that we currently have or ones that we could enhance with ESSER funds. The first two are the most important, our school counselors and our school psychologists. They're our frontline workers. They're working with students on a daily basis, connecting families to resources. They're working with outside therapists and mental health organizations. We have mental health screening and interventions. At the high school, we have the school perception survey, and at selected grade levels at the elementary and the middle school, we have the DESA, and the DESA portal has some interventions built into it for our teachers and for our school psychologists. Contracted services with local partners. Ozaki Family Services helps us with some of our mental health groups. We've done some staff training around de-escalation techniques, working with behaviors and supporting students, some trauma-sensitive training, but you know, the pandemic has really hurt our students' mental health. And so I feel like our staff really could use more training and would feel comfortable, you know, having that training so that they can help their students even more. And then curricular resources. We have a social emotional curriculum at the elementary level. ESSER funds could help either expand that, or we could also look at expanding our social emotional curriculum to the middle school as well. So those are things that are either in place or could be enhanced with the ESSER funds depending upon how the budget shakes out.
So another area that was rated as important was staffing continuity. And obviously we've done things this year in terms of having dedicated building subs, as it's been challenging to both find subs as well as for much of the year we've had challenges with having staff come to work because of situations where they can't because of COVID-related reasons, but we are expecting that everyone's staffing and employment issues are going to continue into next year. We could certainly use that to continue having dedicated building subs so that we can continue to operate effectively, as well as potentially increase sub pay so that we can do our best to maintain those daily subs that come in. We can also, ESSER can go quite a ways to allow for the district to maximize retaining current staff as well as attracting any new staff that we need by allowing for compensation increases for staff.
From an instructional support perspective, I talked a little bit before about our coaches as well as our interventionists, but we have coaches in our district across all areas, reading, math, our instructional coaches at both Woodview and Kennedy, and we're also in the final phases of reaching out to our college and career instructional support position that we were hiring for this year. We'll be hiring that this spring as an impact to our 612 teaching and learning system. Reading interventionists, like we talked about at Woodview and Kennedy, our math interventionist tied to Title I dollars is something that we could expand upon or is part of our current system. Curriculum resources for teachers, I talked to you a little bit briefly about Lexia, as well as our current reading curriculum adoption process. That's something that could be funded through ESSER. Thinking also about speech pathology and some of the needs that we've seen in rising numbers there, and then again, Topher referenced our bubble classrooms in first grade at Woodview and Kennedy for next year, that could be funded through ESSER and the increase in FTE, knowing that those numbers have increased in kindergarten.
So looking at the budget that was presented at the Finance Committee and is being brought forward tonight, we have $1.6 million that we would need to allocate in the budget. Our budget plan would call for $350,000 a year over the next 2 years to be allocated toward mental health and social emotional learning. $125,000 a year for the next 2 years toward staffing continuity, $325,000 a year for the next 2 years toward instructional support. That's $800,000 a year over the next 2 years, total of $1.6 million. Again, this amount was actually just released weeks ago, with the state also having a deadline that by March 11th, you needed to have this plan and put into, submitted to the state. Again, priorities: maintaining current staffing, programming, and services, after which remaining funds can be used for additional services over the next 2 years. Any questions?
Well, for what happens with, like increased sub pay, increased staff pay, speech pathologists, whatever else you might add that make sense and are needs that are going to be paid for by kind of one-time payment versus they're not going away in 2 years. So what do we do where obviously something's going to have to get figured out after that?
Right. As I discussed earlier, using ESSER 3 money to cover the budget shortfall does set up a fiscal cliff down the road. If the state, as they've suggested, they've suggested that they could backfill that and avoid the fiscal cliff, but if that doesn't happen, then we're going to have to make some choices. Other districts will come to that bridge before we do, but we would have to make choices, potentially tough choices, in terms of, do we maintain staffing? Do we use fund balance going forward? Do we look at an operating referendum? We'd have some choices that would be put in front of us as we use these funds in a way that was suggested by the legislature when they passed our current budget biennium.
And also, when we talk about the speech pathologists, we would say that pre-COVID, our staffing needs weren't requiring an extra one. So with a 2-year window of time, you would say that should make up for that learning loss, and those numbers would go back down to where they were pre-COVID. And so that's the ideal situation, right? You're right, building sub pay, some of those things that are a fixed amount that stays there as inflation catches up, would those have had to come up anyways. But that is the mentality that we're going to have, is that the addition pieces have got to be for a short time period, because we won't have the money to support those moving forward.
As Topher said, we're in a better spot.
Correct.
Than a lot of districts.
Mechanically, as we load this plan into the prescribed systems from the state, right? As our budgets change, as we identify different strategies and different elements that we might need relative to catching up and learning, or relative to filling a gap in the budget, we're able to go in and change this plan.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
So it is encouraged that you continue to use data to make sure, is what you're doing working? If not, change. Are your needs changing? If so, then address those by making changes in that budget.
What does ESSER stand for? Should have started with.
That's great. I don't actually. Emergency.
Elementary and secondary school emergency education relief. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I've been saying it so long.
I know, but so this work right here is required. Engagement of district stakeholders is required by federal law and state statute. That we are required to engage district stakeholders, as we have done by virtue of the survey. We're required as a board to work with administration to develop this plan, which we did through the Finance Committee meeting and again tonight. And I will say, unfortunately or regrettably, I don't know, wherever you stand in the political spectrum, reacting in a manner that the legislature has required us to react in this case. And I would say that it's not all their fault. The federal government has looked at this as a one-size-fits-all. I mean, the ESSER 3 funds, just for the record, there's $122 billion that are available in ESSER 3 funds for the country, of which the state of Wisconsin will get $1.5 billion. So on one hand, you can't blame the legislature for saying, well, wait a minute, you have all this money. Districts like us and other districts who remained open spent money, $750,000 roughly, on elements associated with COVID. But you have this windfall. And now I can't necessarily blame the legislature as they look to how is this going to impact constituents and how is this going to impact everyday residents in the state of Wisconsin. But at the same time, a one-size-fits-all approach at the federal government regarding money allocated in this manner to be spent over the next 2 years when our district, surrounding districts, other than the 90 days in 2020, didn't shut down, incurred considerable additional costs, endured perhaps significant learning loss. But this is a one-size-fits-all, and we have to plug ourselves into this model. So it will be challenging from a budgetary perspective moving forward. We will rely on administration to continue to evaluate the data in order to ensure that our plan is working for us locally here, that we're using the dollars to bring about the best results for students and for kids every day. We are required to approve this plan and this budget this evening. So if there are no additional questions, I would ask for a motion to approve the ESSER 3 budget plan as it's presented.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? One question I would have is the application that's due on March 11th requires us to submit our Stay Safe to Stay Open plan, right? The federal documents and application information suggests that we should be following as closely CDC to the best of our abilities and to the best that we see fit from a local control perspective. I think that the plan that we submit, and I'm assuming you have this, should be a compilation of all of the plans since the beginning of the year. Because the latest plan is reflective of the least mitigations relative to a time when the COVID spread is the least. But the beginning of the school year plan is reflective of most mitigation when there was a different time relative to COVID. So just a question, what plan will we submit?
If we're required to do all of them, we would, but if it's your most recent plan, I've heard some discussion, it might be submit your most recently approved plan. We would simply submit that most recently approved plan.
Okay, any additional questions?
Each of our plans does have the date, though, when changes occur.
Exactly, right.
Yep,
right.
So we have been documenting that.
Yeah. Okay, hearing no other questions, all those in favor of the motion to approve the ESSER 3 plan as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And it passes. All right, item J, winter map data. Thank you very much.
So one of those data points you were just talking about, Paul, is academic data. And so through this process, we've watched closely as we've been in person and celebrated in-person data and in-person learning, we have seen things that have impacted our students. And so one of the ways we track learning is through the MAP assessment that we give to our students. As a reminder, we give that to students 2nd through 8th grade. In 2nd grade, we start that process with them in the fall, and then they're tested again in the spring. We do that because that's the beginning of that testing process. We use a different screening process for literacy in K2. And then 3rd through 8th, we administer our MAP assessments in the winter and spring, and then we look from winter to winter how our students are growing. And then we put a lot of our data and our discussions around spring to spring growth and looking at how students grow. We then connect that data to how our students are assessed on the forward exam, which is our state exam, which is given in 4th through 8th grade. And MAP does a nice job of presenting us with information that will project how students will do on that forward exam. So at our curriculum committee, I went in depth as a cohort from 8th grade, 7th grade, all the way down to our current 3rd graders, how that group is doing as they project towards this spring's forward data. So our focus will be some of that historical data, as well as some challenges and next steps on our data review for individual cohorts and within each building, Kennedy, Woodview, and John Long. So from a John Long perspective, looking at all 3 cohorts, 8th grade, 7th grade, and 6th grade, we saw some success with our winter data for our 7th grade students. They showed an increase in students that are projected to be advanced or proficient for this spring's forward exam. So that was certainly a highlight. Our 6th and 8th grade students, their winter projections look like they are trending down. As we look at those students, they were assessed in forward in 3rd grade, 4th grade, and then missed 5th grade, but then they were assessed in 6th grade depending on where they were at within that. So our 6th grade students were assessed last year in 5th grade, and we saw that group go down the most. So our last data point, or that bullet there, is that our 6th grade cohort represents the greatest sense of urgency. And so our middle school team is looking at both math and reading and how we can react to some of those data points from this point to when they take that forward exam in the spring. At Kennedy and Woodview, we saw some celebrations with our 4th and 5th grade students. Both of those cohorts took the forward exam last spring and are showing data trends that are moving in a positive direction. So we're seeing more 4th and 5th grade students projected to be advanced or proficient on this spring's forward exam, and those trend lines are moving in a positive direction. Our 4th grade cohort's winter MAP projection of 57.3% expected to be forward proficient or advanced is an increase of 5.8% from 4th grade, and even an increase from them being proficient and advanced in 3rd grade. Our 3rd grade cohort is the one grade level at the elementary level that their projection or data trends are going down, and that's connected to their MAP assessments in 2nd grade. Those students did not take the forward exam in 2nd grade, but their trends were showing that they were testing higher in 2nd grade than they were in winter of 3rd grade. At all 3 elementary grade levels, the cohorts show a higher percentage of growth, or I should say higher percentage of students advanced or proficient in the areas of math in comparison to reading. So our math scores continue to outperform our reading scores at the elementary level. We see that as a sense of urgency. You've heard us talk about reading as a priority all year. That continues to be our priority. But before we get to some of the things that we're doing as action steps, some of the challenge that we're facing, while we were in person all year, we did have individual students, individual grade levels, individual classrooms that had to quarantine, and we've seen some of those things happen this year. When we have students cohort into a classroom, our teachers are not able to share students across classrooms. Our ROAR and SOAR and our RTI blocks cannot be as across classrooms. Our teachers can't work together across data like a true professional learning community should. And so that has definitely been a barrier and continues to be a barrier this year. But we're excited about where our data looks from a COVID perspective, that our students will be able to go across classrooms. So quarantines and virtual classrooms have been an impact for us. We talk about those 2020, 2021 data points and some of those learning losses that have rolled into this year. The continuity to phonics and some of the things that we've implemented over the last 3 years have not been able to be done to fidelity with an entire group of students, as we've seen students become virtual, or we've seen students that need to quarantine or miss large chunks of instruction. So that's been a challenge. And then one thing we have seen is extended test windows. When students have been quarantined, they might not be able to be tested in the most successful environment with their classrooms. They might have to be pulled out because they were gone on the day of testing. Certainly that's happened a lot more over the last couple of years. So what our response to this data looks like is across the system, as well as within a PLC, and also into the individual students. So what are we doing with students? What are we doing systems? And then connected to what are our teachers doing? So some of those universal supports, you heard Jill talk earlier today about the TACA process and looking at data, those common formative assessments, how students are doing and what we're doing to reteach those students when they don't know a standard. We're looking at utilizing test prep units within Lucy Calkins to see if that will help us prepare for the forward exam. We did see growth in that unit last year. Last year we did not take the text-dependent analysis assessment as a part of forward, but that's really what that unit is intended to do, is help support students in pulling out examples, pulling out data to then respond to a text. And so we've taught that unit this year will be our 2nd year. We're continuing to use the semester trial of Lexia. You heard students respond to that. You heard Jill talk about that. That's a trial period, and we're going to see what that looks like. We're meeting with staff on Friday as a part of the PD day to look a little bit more at our internal data. John Long Middle School, they're transitioning to that SOAR time of 5 days a week of teachers being able to request students. They're using a tool that the high school has used the last couple of years called Enriching Students, where teachers can go in and request students based on that data to come see them and be retaught during SOAR time. So we're using that 5 days a week, which is a change starting just 2 weeks ago. Our internal systems of monitoring of the process of curriculum, using peer observations to give feedback of something like IM, is in its second year of implementation, and looking at connections with Math Institute, the Wisconsin Math Institute, to help our teachers grow in that curriculum development, knowing that 6, 7, 8, we saw some greater concerns in math from the winter map perspective. And then allowing our students to set goals and see that data and to react themselves. They will also be able to set goals around Lexia, or I'm sorry, at the middle school, they'll be able to set some goals and use tools like IXL that we've had for the last 2 years at the middle school. So focus on student needs. Again, I talked about the TACA process. Our teams get together and review data at the individual elementary buildings. They look at grade level teams and prioritize the students within the data that maybe haven't shown growth. I've talked a lot about our advanced and proficient students, but the other 2 levels are basic and below basic, and prioritizing what those students can do to grow. We want to look at all students. We want our advanced students to continue to grow and stay in advanced. So those individual grade level teams do a lot of work around prioritizing needs of a team. And when our teachers can share across those groups, they can make the most impact, and that's what we've seen with professional learning communities. At the middle school, they're using some teamwork processes and working as intensive intervention teams at the middle school and identifying students that need extra support. We're ensuring our interventions are appropriate and working, so we have fidelity checks with our school psychologists to make sure our interventions are done with fidelity and in the amount of time that those resources ask of us. We're using more CFAs to drive instruction. Our PLCs are in full implementation at the middle school and high school this year, so our teams are talking across a class. So we have course-alike teams meeting, and we have 2 teachers of each course meeting to talk about their data and implementing and observing and talking about how they can impact student learning. Again, we talked a little bit about student goal setting. Our students are setting goals tied to MAP and using IXL as an implementation tool to focus on MAP standards or individual standards that they had maybe done poorly on MAP. They can work on that individual's targeted skill within the math tool IXL. That's our map data. One quick just heads up, this Friday, February 25th, is our last PD day during the school year. Our next day is not until June, so just a quick update. Our 612 team will be working with the solution tree presenter, Dershawn John, on connecting some work that we've done with proficiency scales pre-pandemic, and they're gonna be talking about how they can use SOAR and Black Hawk Time to really push on student learning in areas that students are struggling on. And then our 4K through 5 team is going to be working on the science of reading training and what the science of reading means to us and how we need to start to implement things immediately connected to our current resource. So I'll take questions on our PD on Friday or our map data.
Any questions for Michael? I know we spent a great deal of time of this at the curriculum committee meeting last Monday, but any additional questions this evening? All right, then this information only. Thank you very much. Item K, notification of technical corrections in Neola update 31.1.
Yes, per board policy 131.1 in bylaws and policies, it talks about if we have any technical corrections to policies that are not substantial, do not reflect a policy decision, or substantive consideration by the board, such as a correction or a grammatical or typographical error, then the board has authorized me to be able to make those changes. So these are, and as long as I inform the board at the next meeting. So we had our meeting with Richard from Neola earlier this month, and these 12 policies have had technical revisions that have been made to them through Neola as they've updated their policies, that I'm bringing that to the board so you are aware of that.
All right, then I'd entertain a motion to approve the technical. Oh, no, we don't have to. You're right. You've already done that. We've made that motion. We've given you that authority.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Yep, that's okay.
We're not taking it back. All right. For information, thank you. So Then we move on to item L. The Board of Education will convene into closed session to consider teacher and support staff compensation. This is in accordance with Wisconsin State Statutes 1985, Sub 1, Part C. Do I have a motion to adjourn into closed? We'll take a voice vote. How do you vote, Sean?
Yes.
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 And yes. We're in closed. Thank you.